Shabbat Shalom, Hebrews. This is a message from the Israelite Brotherhood. Alright, Hebrews, check this out. How about, can an Israelite get in trouble, with YAH for not worshiping other gods? Can an Israelite get in trouble with Almighty YAH for not worshiping other gods? I mean, that's what he wants. He wants you not to worship the other gods. How about that, we Israelites, been tricked into worshiping other gods. That's like, for slavery, for instance, when our ancestors ran into Africa and got kidnapped during what's called the transatlantic slave trade era. We left the promised land in the book of Jeremiah and went into Africa to do the Egyptian religion. That's that same as that Thellus, that's Horus, Osiris, and how about we went into Africa to worship it, been on it for a long time, and how that we, ain't never just really just worship Almighty Yah. The tribe of Judah did more than any other tribes, but that how did we eventually forsaken the Creator. Can the Israelite get in trouble with Yah for not worshiping other gods? Can we get in trouble with the Creator if we don't worship other gods? No, that's what He want. That's what the Creator want. How about that it's kind of evil that we Israelites today, mostly the ones that's called Negroes, African Americans, and that went by the title colors that ain't never woke up to their true Israelite heritage. How about our people was given a God to worship during the slavery days, after being enslaved, that the slave owner, put his God and his religion on the captive Israelites. Changed our names and everything. The Tanakh said it would happen, once the covenant was broken, that our heritage would be blotted out. If we forsake the Creator and went and worship other gods, it happened during what's called the transatlantic slave trade era. And that, we Israelites got enslaved, and then our enslaver put a religion, his gods, on us. And that we Israelites, after hundreds of years of being up under our slave owners' rule and children's rule, that we just totally submitted to their gods and their version of, of our history, because they supposedly, created this New Testament, which supposed to be the exiles history, the people that was taken from Babylon and that made it back home. It's supposed to be their history, but I'm telling you it's incorrect, and that is false, and that is the history of the people that occupied our land. And guess what? By coincidence, the people that occupied our land after we ran off, the Scythians, the Babylonians always worship God's sons. They always believed in God's sons. You can search Babylon history, man. They got a whole bunch of God's sons on the wall. Well, anyway, those folks, after the Israelites were destroyed, start, recording their history and made their history important, and then they call it a New Testament. And within this New Testament, they supposed to have a God's son that's supposed to be descended from this individual that's a God's son. They call him Jesus. He's supposed to be descendant of the peoples in the Tanakh. But I done did some real thorough research, and I showed that, hey man, that's skeptical and that's not true, because the Israelites that come home from Babylon got destroyed real fast during Greek time, and then all the people that had settled in our land, had a worship, man, before man, before they come to our land, and how they worship and believe in God's sons and so forth, and then how that it was those people's gods and so forth that was, put in the land, and peoples was forced to worship. Look, all right, man, if you go to Ezra, man, if you go to Ezra 4, chapter 4, and man, he'll name off some nations uh, that came and settled in our land during the exile times, and they was all from the Babylonian era. About 12 nations, what I record: the Danites, the Arphishites, the Tarpalites, the Arsaphites, the Archivites, the Babylonians, the Sushanites, the Devites, and the Elamites. And then I can show that, man, before then, some more God's son worshipers was placed in our land, but they was real slick. Man, if you go to, man, that'd be Second Kings, 17:24. Let me see, Second Kings, chapter 17, verse 24. And then you'll see that these peoples was placed in our land, and then they believed in God's sons too, because they was from Babylon. All right, and then you go to Second Kings. That'll be Second Kings 17, chapter 17, verse 24. And the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon, and from Cuddar, and from Ava, and from some Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. So now all these folks doing God's son worship that was placed in our land. So it makes sense that the God's son worshipers would want to present their religion and their belief as real. You know what I'm saying? As real. And once they got control, and they got control of the Israelite heritage, man, for sure. You know what I'm saying? I show this real easily how the peoples who settled in our land, took over our heritage. And they was from God worshiping, God's son worshiping places and so forth, especially in Babylon. But here's a list, man, if you Israelites wanted to study. Now, this is real important. Now, we know that we was in Egypt, and we exodus from, that we was in Egypt bondage, and that we exodus, man, I think 1445 with Prophet Moses, 1445. But we was in Egypt worshiping this one. You know what I'm saying? And that was the original God's son thing that had come from Egypt. And we know we wasn't supposed to follow none of the ways of the Egyptians. And then as you go, look, after we got the covenant with Prophet Moses, you know what I'm saying? That look, all these God's son religions started to spread. And was everywhere. Look, in Perga, in 1170, in Chaldea, and Krishna of India come about, and all these supposed to be God's sons sent to save and to redeem himself, and they were sacrificed and ascended in meant to heavens, and that all their story is the same, and that how this was all over and spread all over the earth when we got the covenant. So who could be responsible, men, for an alternate religion? And ain't none of these people get the covenant. Almighty, I ain't get them the covenant. You know what I'm saying? And I can show where he said that, that all the other nations worship this and that, and that how he only gave us the truth, the Israelites the truth, and how these other folks ain't got the truth, worshiping these, secondary deities and so forth. And I can show throughout whole Tanakh history that Almighty Yah say he don't want you worshiping no other gods, and it was for a reason. Man, look at these. Man, look at these gods right here. All these ascended into heaven, man, that ascended into heaven and so forth, and are God sons and so forth, and ain't none of them Prophet Moses dealt with besides with the sword. He dealt with them by the sword. Their forefathers. He dealt with their forefathers by the sword. But look at this. When we got conquered by the Chaldeans, and then they took over our land, and there was people already in our land that, kind of, they believed in secondary gods, God's sons. Babylon walls is full of them. And that the Chaldeans. And let's see what this historian had to say. All right, the Chaldeans, as Mr. Higgins informed us, have noted in their scared books the account of the crucifixion of a god with the above name. That's Crete. He was also known as the Redeemer, and was styled the everlasting, the ever blessed Son of God, the Savior of the race, the anointing offering for any angry God. And when he was offered up, both heaven and earth was shaken to the foundation. Now, ain't that story familiar? Ain't that story familiar? Now, these are the folks that conquered and settled in our lands. The Chaldeans, really Ashkenazi. And I could show that that's all that the New Testament dealt with was Ashkenazi, because Ashkenazi had settled in our land. Ashkenazi settled in our land during the Babylonian Wars, and it ain't no question about that. It's no question about that. And they settled in what's called Scythopolis, and controlled the Discopolis city. Scythopolis was the capital of the Discopolis cities, and that's where all the power come from. And I got a video showing that the Egyptians, not the Egyptians, but the Greeks and the other folks that settled in the Promised Land, the Romans, the Greeks, that they came to Scythopolis soon as they got the God Son formula kind of down, how that they wanted to push it, that they come to Scythopolis, and that Scythopolis was before the Council of Nicaea, and that Christianity, all the bishops hung out there. So, we know that the Chaldeans, the Scythians controlled Chaldea, you know what I'm saying? And that they had destroyed Assyria, and then, they was part of Babylon, and maybe they had control of Babylon. And that they came to our land, and that they took over, and that they settled in the land, Scythopolis, and that they parents worship God's sons, as stated right here, man. I'm talking about this can't be changed. Israelites will try to change history, and then it makes sense that we got God's son worship from their descendants on the plantation. Look, the Chaldeans, as Mr. Higgins informed us, have noted in these scared books the account of the crucifixion of a God with the above name. He was also known as the Redeemer, and was styled the ever blessed Son of God, the Savior of the race, the anointing offering for any angry God. And when he was offered up, both heaven and earth were shooken to their foundation. Now look, this is before we was enslaved, but it was the peoples who enslaved us that, man, created that. You see that Crete in 1200 BC, man, we was on our way into the Promised Land. Why those other folks was worshiping God's sons that was sacrificed and redeemed for them. That's not an Israelite doctrine. We was told to just only follow the laws that the Creator gave us by Moses, that's recorded in what they call the Old Testament, in the Torah. In the Torah. We was only supposed to follow those laws, and for some reason we ain't never been given those laws, and that how that they gave us the other form of worship, the God Son worship. They gave us the God Son worship. Look, we was messed up. Look, man, around about 8 years of Eros, around about 834 BCE, we was towed down. We was towed down already, and it wasn't, about 100 years, before that, about 98 years before that, Jeroboam came out of Egypt in 931 BC, came out of Egypt with the God's son worship under the form of the golden calf. It's the same as Horus, Isis, and Horus. You know, it's the same in that how that we was already messed up. We was already messed up, and then all the God's sons worship just spread everywhere. They just spread everywhere, and that Judah was the only tribe trying to hold down what Almighty Yah gave Prophet Moses. All right, but we see that the Chaldeans, the people who settled in our land, Ashkenazi, the Scythians, that they worship God's sons, and you know that we can't change that, and that they were our conquerors, and we can't change that. But what we can change is how we view history that was given to us by our parents. Now we want to believe that our parents did us right. You know, they did us right by feeding us and loving us and so forth. But some of the history that our parents give us, man, that our foreparents gave us that didn't have access to the abundance of information that we have today, that it was incorrect. And a lot of them gave us that information basically to save us, because during the time that it was created and given to us, if you didn't believe in it, it was a death sentence. So it was important for Israelites to believe in that type of stuff during that time that we was enslaved on the plantation, because if not, you'll possibly die. You know, if the slave owner walk up to you and say, hey, do you believe in Jesus, that it was probably safer to say yes and teach your kids that, because here go this man that'll put you to death because you don't say you don't believe that, something simple. And then, you know, we Israelites were so removed from the truth, from the Egyptian worship, you know, getting us put out the land, and then our sojourn in Africa until we was captured, and that how we was messed up anyway. But it was already prophesied that we would be worshiping gods given to us by our captors. By our captors, man. And if you go to Deuteronomy, that's one of the curses. Man, if you go to Deuteronomy 28:36, and the Elohim shall bring thee, and the king which thou shalt set over thee, unto a nation neither thou nor their fathers have known, and thou serve other gods, wood and stone, and thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations where the Elohim shall lead thee. All right, and then some of us done reached some success, and then got some success, and you know, we didn't attribute, you didn't probably attribute to your parents' believe in its gods, you know, and sometimes, you know, men that Almighty Yah, you know, men allow you to prosper in the material world, but sometimes it's to help the Israelite cause, and you just don't know it, that your success come to put you in a position to do that, and that, you know, that's more important, and that Almighty Yah got his reasons for letting certain people survive, and certain people don't. But you know, man, I was just reading in the Tanakh, and I'm gonna go try to find that part where it said that sometimes he'll let you believe stuff until your lights go out, into Sheol, until you be gone and your soul be gathered, and so forth. And that's, you know, you could be happy and comfortable here. Your spirit is housed in your body, but will it be comfortable in another place? You know, and that can't nobody die for your sins, and that how you responsible for what, you know, you do. All right, Israelites, our captors put their gods on us. Our, our captors put their gods on us, and Almighty Yah, I mean, if you read throughout the Tanakh, man, everywhere that it always say how Almighty Yah hate other gods, other God worship, and so forth, and how did Almighty Yah meant against other God worship, and how that he ain't got no respect for no other gods, and he ain't endorsed no God's sons to come do anything for the Israelites. And then I showed, I think I got a video when I was in the promised land, that how I showed it after I got the Tanakh and then read, you know, certain parts in Isaiah, and then made the comparison, and that how the Christians wrote the the Old Testament, the Baptists, and the Protestant, and they will put their spin on it because they foreparents worship God's sons, as I'm showing in history. All these nations, and that how did they worship God's sons, and that how did they created that religion. And what's the forefounders of it? I can easily prove this and have proved this in numerous videos dealing with the New Testament history. But check this out. All right, remember, and that it's us, Prophet Moses telling us, man, it's a lot of good history, man, in Deuteronomy when you read it in the Tanakh. Not the Old Testament book that the Christians created, but in the Tanakh that the Jewish people worship, who the Christians acknowledge as supposed to be the Israelites or descendants from them. So they're going to have the more correct version, you know what I'm saying, of the Israelites' history as the people who the Greeks and the Romans thought was Israelites. All right. Remember, all right, this is Deuteronomy 18. Remember that it is the Elohim your Yah who gives you the power to get wealth in influence of the covenant that he made on an oath with your fathers, as still the case. If you do forget the Elohim your Yah and follow other gods to serve them or bow down to them, I warn you this day that you shall certainly perish, like the nations that the Elohim will cause to perish before you. So shall you perish, because you did not heed the word of the Elohim. And look, man, that happened. The book of Jeremiah tell you what happened for us doing the God's son worship, which was Isis and Horus, or what we call the Queen of Heaven. And that happened. That happened when we perished up off the land. But man, it's a trip how Almighty Yah bestowed His kindness on us, and fulfilling the prophets Abraham's promise that he gave him, that we Israelites was free from Egypt, and then we eventually got the promised land, but then that we fell off. And start tampering with God's son worship from the Egyptian captivity, and how we never let it go. And then you can see with all the other nations how it was everywhere, the God's son worship, and that's not what Prophet Moses gave us. And Prophet Moses' history of what he gave the Israelites is outlined in detail. Man, I want to read this, but because this is what state that the Israelites constantly find themselves in. Hear, O Israel, you are about to cross the Jordan to go in and possess the nations greater and more populous than you, great cities with walls sky high, and people great and tall, that the Ananukas of whom you have knowledge, for you have heard of it. Who can stand up to the children of Anak? Know then this day that none of other than the Elohim your Yah is crossing at your head a divine fire. It is he who will wipe them out. He will subdue them before you, that you may quickly dispossess and destroy them, as the Elohim promised you. And when the Elohim your Yah has thrust them from your path, and say not to yourselves, the Elohim has enabled us to possess this land because of our virtue. It is rather because of the wickedness of these nations that the Elohim is dispossessing them before you. It is not because of your virtue and your rectitude that he will be able to, and see, that you will be able to possess their country, but it is because of their wickedness that the Elohim your Yah is dispossessing those nations before you. And in order to fulfill the oath that the Elohim made to your father Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. See, those nations that was before us did a God son worship, and all that stuff, and then how did Baal and all them, Baal and all that old wickedness, and that how that Almighty Yah put us in the land and destroyed them, and we were supposed to only worship him, not no God's son worship, and that how the God's son worship has always come from other people other than the Israelites. We didn't create, we did not create the God's son worship, and that how did that come from the nations surrounding us? That's like when we got in captivity, that the nations that enslaved us put their religion on us. It's why Israelites believe in God's sons and so forth. Know then that it is not for any virtue of yours that the Elohim your Yah is giving you this good land to possess, for you are a stiff-necked people. Remember, never forget how you provoked the Elohim your Yah to anger in the wilderness from the day that you left the land of Egypt. I mean, until you reach this place, you have continued defiance toward the Elohim, and I can show that that's true because during Exodus, when Prophet Moses left, and that we throwed up the IS horror stuff, which was the God son like religion that come from Egypt, that we practices after Prophet Moses left, thinking he wasn't gonna come back. And then how did they went to that? See, it always come from our enemies, and that it didn't come from us. All right, Herb, you also provoked the Elohim that the Elohim was angry enough with you to have destroyed you. I have ascended the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant that the Elohim had made with you. And I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights, eating no bread and drinking no water. And the Elohim gave me the 2 tablets of stone inscribed by the finger of Yah with the exact words that the Elohim had addressed to you on the mountain out of the fire on the day of the assembly. At the end of those 40 days and 40 nights, the Elohim gave me the 2 tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant. And the Elohim said to me, hurry, go down from here at once, for the people whom you brought out of Egypt have acted wickedly. They have been quick to turn astray from the path that I enjoyed upon them. They have made themselves molten image. The Elohim Father said to me, I see that this is a stiff-necked people. Let me alone, and I will destroy them and blot out their name from under heaven, and I will make you a nation far more numerous than they. I stared down the mountain. I started down the mountain, a mountain ablaze with fire, the 2 tablets of the covenant in my hands. I saw how you had sinned against the Elohim your Yah. You had made yourselves a molten calf. You had been quick to stray from the path that the Elohim had enjoyed upon you. Therefore, I gripped the 2 tablets and flung them away with both my hands, smashing them before your eyes. I threw myself down before the Elohim, eating no bread and drinking no water 40 days and 40 nights as before, because of the great wrong you had committed, doing what displeased the Elohim and vexing him. For I was in dread of the Elohim's furious anger against you, which moved him to wipe you out. In that time, too, the Elohim gave heed to me. Moreover, the Elohim was angry enough with Aaron to have destroyed him. So I also intercede for Aaron at that time, as for the sinful thing you had made, the calf, that it took part to fire. I broke it to bits and ground it thoroughly until it was fine as dust. And I threw its dust into the brook that came down from the mountain. And again, you provoked the Elohim at Terah and at Massa and at Kibro Haviot. And when the Elohim set you on from the Kadesh Barnea, saying, go up and take possession of the land that I am giving you, you fronted the command of the Elohim your Yah. You did not put your trust in him and did not obey him. As long as I have known you, you have been defiant toward the Elohim. When I lay prostrate before the Elohim those 40 days and 40 nights, because of the Elohim was determined to destroy you, I prayed to the Elohim and said, O Elohim Yah, do not annihilate your very own people whom you redeemed in your majesty, with whom you freed from Egypt with a mighty hand. Give thought to your servant Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You see, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob didn't worship no God's sons. They didn't believe in no God's sons, so we got to believe like they believe. If you research their history, you will see that our father, Prophet Abraham and Isaac, they didn't worship no God's son. They didn't worship no God's sons. And that how God's sons worship me come from our enemies and so forth. You know, God's sons worship come from our enemies. And I just showed this, how that the people that captured us and ruled over us would put their gods on us, and their descendants did in the slavery days. But man, if you read the Tanakh history, man, it go on and on and on, telling you how that Almighty Yah was against God's son worship. You know, and that how he hated any gods and stuff, and that he didn't want us to associate with any gods but him, and that he the only one that we can worship. And then if you compare our history to the curses, which was the punishment for worshiping other gods, that you will see that it's what they call black history. All right, Israelites, you know, y'all can research these gods here, and you see the dates. Man, you see the dates I got when they come about, and that all these come about basically when we start breaking the covenant, and when we wouldn't do right with Almighty Yah, that the God Son worship got his hold over the earth, and that's what dominate the earth right now. You know, we can't be doing no God Son worship. You know, that's just something we can't do. And then, you know, why would you worship a God that the slave owners gave you? You know, that we know that ain't no Israelites come from Africa, captured from Africa, came to the Americas on no ships, believing in God's sons, and how that was something that was forced on us. You know, even though we worship the Egyptian versions of it and so forth, that we didn't come with this specific one that they put on us. And then I showed that, man, how ironic is that, you know, that Jesus, or the God's Son that's in the New Testament, had the opportunity to go throughout Africa to talk to and try to straighten up the Queen of Heaven worshipers, because we were showing up in Africa when so-called Jesus, man, was on the promised land, and how we was in Africa, and how that Jesus went to Egypt and then went back to the promised land where the Scythians was in Scythopolis, in the Discopolis cities, and that how he didn't go throughout Africa trying to find us that broke the covenant in the book of Jeremiah. You know, in the book of Jeremiah, we broke the covenant. You know, if you go to that'll be Jeremiah. That's gonna be Jeremiah 44. All right, this is us breaking the covenant, other gods and stuff, and what got us enslaved, and why we enslaved here in Americas. This act right here. This is Jeremiah 44. So let me see. Then all the men, this Jeremiah 44:15. Then all the men which knew that their wives had burned incense unto other gods, and all the women that stood by, a great multitude, even all the people that dwelt in the land of Egypt and Pathros, answered Jeremiah, saying, As for the word that thou hast spoken unto us in the name of the Elohim, we will not hearken unto thee, but we will certainly do so whatever thing go forth out of our own mouth, to burn incense unto the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto her, and as we have done, we and our fathers, our kings, our princes, in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem. For then had we plenty of victuals, and were well, and saw no evil. But since we left off to burn incense unto the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offerings unto her, we have wanted all things, and have been consumed by the sword and by famine. That caused our enslavement. How we never come back to be reunited with the exiles to Babylon that was freed by the Persians, and how did they come home, but how the Queen of Heaven worshipers, the God Son worshipers, see, that stuff been on us in one form or another, in a sense, that how did they never come back to be reunited with the exiles from Babylon in 538 BC, and how we went into Africa and got enslaved. God's son worship caused out enslavement. And then how that we never come back to the promised land, and how we done fulfilled all the curses. All the curses in the strange land, and how we been a messed up people. And then that's one of the reasons how all these other nations got their power, is because that they got us off the original worship to worship they false gods which give it power. We give the other false gods power. They power wouldn't be nothing, and it comes from their religion first. They power wouldn't be anything if we wouldn't give it to them, and we give them the power by believing in their gods and so forth. All right, Israelites, I just want to show this little history, you know what I'm saying, and how that you can research all those false god sons and so forth, and you'll see that ain't none of that what Almighty Yah gave the Israelites, and that the Almighty Yah gave us the truth and to way to govern ourselves and be free of that false worship is to believe in Him. All right, shalom, Israelites. Message from the Israelite Brotherhood.